Hi, I'm Dr. David Chang. I'm here with Kyle Clausen, the CEO of Resolve, and we're here to talk about physician employment contracts, negotiating them, and all the kind of pitfalls and intricacies that are associated with that. I feel, like many other physicians that first came out of residency, that learning the nuances of contracts, how practices are run, was just overwhelming. And I'm glad you're here to talk to us a little more about that. Our Young Physicians Organization has been clamoring for a significant amount of information in this regard.
Sure. Yeah, no, we're excited to help provide the education, and the Academy reached out to us. We see a high volume of these contracts nationwide, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for coming here.
You bet.
Now, when I first came out of residency, I went right into fellowship, and right after fellowship, I was looking for an academic position, landed an academic position here at the University of Missouri, but really didn't know a whole lot about contracting, negotiations, and stuff like that. And really, I think as physicians, we don't get a whole lot of basics about that in medical school. And here we're faced with having to figure out our employment right afterwards without any business sense. So what do you find are necessary parts of contracts to look at when you first evaluate them?
Sure, good question. Your situation is extremely typical. I mean, that's almost all the residents and fellows that we see are exactly what you explained. They've focused on medicine their entire education and career to that point, and so now this is the first time they're being handed a piece of paper that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And they don't know what to do with it. So there's multiple points of any contract that are going to be important, and I think the thing that I would stress to anybody that's watching this is that those things are going to be individualized to you. So what's most important to you might not be the same for a colleague of yours, and so making sure you're paying attention to those points are important. But everything falls into three main categories for us. The first main category would be day in and day out things, okay? And that's a wide variety, but that can be call, that can be how much staffing you have, right? What days of the week you're going to work, if there's some religious issues there, or even I'm only supposed to work 4 days a week because I've got kids at home. Right. For some of our female clients, that bucket is step one, because if you can solve that, you've solved hopefully the Monday through Friday issues. Gotcha. The second bucket would be compensation and benefits. Okay, everybody wants to be paid fairly. We want everybody to be paid fairly, and the numbers component of that can be difficult, especially if you've never seen what a comp model looks like before, if you don't know the difference between work RVUs and collections and gross billings and things like that.
And I imagine that there are so many different ways that compensation can occur.
There really are, yeah. There's different models, and we can get into more detail on that as we go through this. And then aside from compensation, the other benefits, the health insurances, the retirement plans, all of that is, again, a foreign language to some extent, for folks coming out. So that's bucket two, okay? Third bucket would be, for the attorneys, the worst case scenario. If this doesn't work out, you're not happy at the university or whatever practice you join, how do I get out of my contract? Can I? Can I still practice in the area? Is there a non-compete? Do I have tail coverage? Do I have to repay that big signing bonus they gave me, or the student loan reimbursement that they gave me? All of those kind of worst case scenario things is bucket three. And so for a high level, for somebody looking at this for the first time, those are the three categories that are going to give you most of your problems.
And that's a lot to digest, I imagine, for newly people coming out. Right. Just like going into medical school, there's a whole new lingo and language that has to be learned when you're learning medicine. I guess that's the same way with contracts.
It really is. And so if you're not familiar with those terms, you either need to educate yourself to a high degree, and if you don't have time for that, you need to find some help, somebody that does this day in and day out to get those answers.
Is there anything that's non-negotiable? Everything's negotiable to a certain degree.
Your name? No, I don't know. Everything's negotiable to a degree. And again, it depends on if you have leverage. If you don't have any leverage, the employers will tend to know that, and they're going to be willing to change far fewer terms.
So speaking of leverage, so when you talk about leverage in terms of negotiating a contract, what do I have as leverage?
The ability to walk away.
Okay.
Or the ability to go somewhere else. Oh. It's no different than a free agent in sports. We talked about athletes before.
Yeah.
If you've got 3 offers, right, what happens to that compensation? It tends to go up, or the terms that you want, the vacation time. All those things, they're going to compete against each other. If you have no other options, or if you've already turned down option B, C, and D, okay, your leverage internally, even if they don't know it, is down, right? You're willing to push much less hard than you would if you had 3 or 4 offers, okay? So the ability to walk away, the ability to transition. You know, if you're in a contract and you're renegotiating, if you have a non-compete that says if you leave, you've got to leave town, and
Right.
you've got 3 kids in school, your leverage is less than if you have a non-compete that's non-existent or says it's 1 mile. So the ability to walk away is the most important thing.
You know, so as a resident that's coming out of training, where can I get information to better equip myself to learn about contracting in the business of medicine?
Sure. First piece of advice would be start early. So you don't want to start when you're 9 months from finishing, right? I mean, you want to take that education at 18 to 24 months in advance. There are 3 areas that I would tell you to look would be one, colleagues. You know, you've had folks ahead of you in training that have gone out into the real world. Ask them how their experience was, when they started, who they talked to, how they built their professional team, who they used for help on a contract. I would also talk to the faculty, right? They've got resources, the departments have access to data sometimes that you'd have to pay for otherwise. And then the third thing would be is your professional societies, and you can maybe tell us a little bit more about that, but there's an entire network of folks outside of just where you train that would be willing to help.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly the Academy has a lot of resources that are available through ENT Connect, allows us to kind of touch base with a huge host of different practitioners out there, not only academic practitioners, but also private practice people that can bounce ideas off of, including, and also, you know, committees and groups like the Young Physicians Group is also a pretty good one as well, too. You know, sometimes if you look at your faculty mentors, they may not have had as much experience in the real world, and certainly I feel that way to a certain degree, that I've kind of had my first job here at the university and haven't really ever stepped forward to look out there. So I would sometimes feel I am not adequately equipped to even counsel our residents very well at all.
Sure. And that's one area where I think we feel good about what we do, is because we see such a wide variety of clients that are going different states, different settings, different types of employers, where the society, you know, the ENT Connect that you talked about, I think is a great first step. And I think also having some expertise at the end of that process that also has a wide variety of experiences would also be helpful.
What are some of the, I guess, potential professional issues that might force physicians to change locations?
The most common thing that we hear is that they told me something, whatever that is, in the interview, whether it was call or my, you know, vacation time, or I was going to be paid, I was going to become partner. You can insert any line there, and it never happened, right? Or it was the exact opposite of what I thought I was getting into. If I'm doing shift work, for example, right? I mean, it's days and nights, that type of thing. So if you can get that detail from whatever they told you in the interview, as detailed as possible into the contract, you're going to be a lot happier. And I think you can reduce the likelihood of turnover. You'll never take it to 0, but certainly you'll get an idea if they're going to follow through. If they tell you call is 1 in 4, and they will not put it in the contract, they refuse to put it in, I would question whether call really is 1 in 4. Okay? And so those types of things are where the red flags would pop up.
I'm a new physician that's looking to get a job, and I'm having to almost be in an adversarial relationship, seemingly, with my new employer. How do you coach physicians to think about negotiations and negotiate effectively?
Sure. I'm going to separate this again into a couple different buckets, because the type of employer makes a big difference on this. Okay. The larger the institution, there's going to be administrators involved in that process. If it's HCA, if it's Kaiser, if it's some large institution, they're going to come out and they're going to say, this is our standard contract. Okay, it's never negotiated. The last 100 doctors have signed it. You know, this is yours to sign. Our experience is that that's not true. Okay, they will make adjustments. That it may not be language that they can change, but they can change those numbers. They can change the terms of the agreement. So there's very few that are really truly non-negotiable. If they're non-negotiable, it's likely because they've got 5 or 6 candidates. It's a supply and demand issue. It's not that the position of the organization is that they won't change it. Okay, so starting there, everything's negotiable. Ask for what you want. If you don't get it, you can make your decision at that point. Okay. If it's a smaller practice, if it's a private practice, okay, that's a different relationship entirely. Okay, they want to know if you're going to be a good fit as a colleague, if they're going to be able to work with you as a partner at some point long term. And so those conversations, we try to have the physician handle those if they can, until the practice then turns and says, talk to our lawyer, right? Because if you're trying to be a partner at some point, you need to keep that relationship active and alive.
How often do physicians change jobs?
Well, hopefully not too often,
Yeah.
but the
But it
statistics,
occurs.
it occurs a lot. The
What do the
statistics say 50% of all physicians will change jobs within the first 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
So which means, to me, that means they're unhappy, right? Something happened, they made a bad decision, or life changed early on,
Sure.
and they're looking for something else. You know, I don't think the data is as good after that, but 2 or 3
Okay.
positions throughout your career would not be uncommon.
I would feel really uncomfortable trying to sometimes ask for more things. Here I am as a freshly minted physician looking to become gainfully employed. How do I go about asking for things?
Self-doubt is a huge issue for our clients. They don't want to seem greedy, right? The dollar amounts that they're being presented are 4 or 5 times what they earned as a resident, so it should be enough. My point back would be, if everybody else in the group is making $50,000 more a year than you, how do you feel about that? Then all of a sudden that mindset, kind of changes to say, well, I should be paid fairly too, okay? How you go about it is important. Presenting yourself as an equal, right? Making sure you're acting with data behind you. You're not just asking for a number. It's objective. Here's the reference point. If you don't think that's a great reference point, show me your reference point and we can maybe meet in the middle on that. But if you can be informed, if you can be educated, if you can have multiple offers so you know what's fair and what's not, I think you're in a really good spot to ask those questions. It's just a matter of getting over that fear maybe of doing it.